And it's now time for business news with Kate Moody. Thank you for joining us, Kate.
Hi, Julia.
You're going to start with the Geneva Motor Show, where the words of the moment are green and Brexit.
Yeah, those have really been the two major themes of pretty much every industry event in recent years. The EU is imposing tough new limits on carbon dioxide emissions and forcing manufacturers to shift their green innovations into high gear. Meanwhile, the ongoing uncertainty about Brexit has led a number of car makers to scale back their footprint in the UK. Many of them have threatened that a disorderly Brexit could lead them to shift production elsewhere. Now, I've been speaking to Andy Palmer, president and CEO of the iconic British car brand Aston Martin, about the challenges ahead. Take a listen.
Well, it's both a constraint and an opportunity. One of the benefits of being a small car manufacturer is that you use your size and agility to move quickly. And I think in that sense, it rather gives us an opportunity and the ability to be able to say and be able to launch relatively quickly an all-emission lineup. The Gonda being more than one car. It's planned at the moment to be two cars, both 100% electric, I think plays to our advantage.
As a quintessentially British brand, how worried are you about Brexit? What's the biggest threat for Aston Martin?
Well, we're not so worried about tariffs. I mean, a lot of car manufacturers, I understand, are worried about tariffs. Most of our worry is around the friction of parts coming into the UK. Obviously, we make all of our cars in the UK. I think we're ready. I mean, we've assumed disorderly Brexit. We've assumed worst case, plan for the worst, hope for the best. We've put in place our contingency plans. For us, we're already in a disorderly Brexit because we're making cars now that will be sold in April and May, and all of those contingency plans are basically in play. If it gets better over the next few weeks and we find a deal, then great. I can wind back those contingency plans. But as it is right now, we're ready for a disorderly Brexit.
Now, you mentioned the importance of importing car parts. How dependent really is your supply chain on parts that come from elsewhere, in particular EU member states?
Well, 2 years ago we were very exposed because had we left the EU 2 years ago, we wouldn't have met the WTO requirement for local content. So we would have ended up paying all sorts of taxes. Over the course of the last 2 years, one of the things that we've done is that we've increased our UK content. Now, we assume that the local content under WTO rules will be 55%, and I'm very pleased to say that with the launch of the new cars over the past 2 years, we now exceed 55% local content. So we're ready for it, and that's the benefit of the 2 years. Likewise, we've done a lot of the benefits of a weaker pound has yielded us some cash that we could spend on marketing in the United States. And as a result of doing that, the United States is now our largest market, and that obviously takes the pressure off of the EU to some extent. So again, we're ready.
Aston Martin's CEO speaking to us earlier. Let's check in on the day's trading action now. The major European indices closed higher. The FTSE 100 outperformed in London. It was pushed in part by Vodafone, which saw its shares up 2%. Wall Street's been hovering around the flat line throughout the trading day. Shares of the retailer Target are up nearly 5% on stronger than expected sales figures. General Electric shares, meanwhile, have slumped 5% as its CEO warned investors to expect negative cash flow for the year to come. The Chinese government has lowered its economic growth targets for the coming year. The announcement on the first day of the country's annual Congress is closely watched as it sets the tone for how much Beijing might intervene in the world's second largest economy. Catherine Viette has the details.
A tough struggle ahead. That's the warning from the Chinese premier as the country contends with a stuttering economy.
We will face a graver and more complicated environment, as well as challenges, foreseeable and otherwise, that are greater in number and size.
Addressing the National People's Congress, Li Keqiang announced the government is lowering its growth forecast to between 6 and 6.5%. That's less than the previous 2 years' target of around 6.5%, which were exceeded. Analysts say the range gives Beijing more flexibility, a key point in a system where hitting stated goals is still politically important. As trade tensions with the U.S. drag on the economy, Li promised to make it easier for foreign companies to do business in China, including banning forced technology transfers, a complaint made by both the U.S. and the EU.
We will do more to attract foreign investment. We will further relax controls over market access, shorten the negative list of foreign investment, and permit completely foreign-funded enterprises to operate in more sectors.
Additionally, the government will cut company taxes and employers' social insurance contributions by around 260 billion euros, reduce VAT for the manufacturing sector from 16% to 13%, and invest around 340 billion euros in infrastructure projects. Finally, China will increase lending to small firms by around 30%, all part of Beijing's efforts to jumpstart the economy.
Huawei has opened a cybersecurity lab in Brussels as it fights for its reputation and business in the Western world. The Trump administration has been encouraging its allies to follow its lead in blocking the Chinese telecommunications giant with mixed success. Luke Schrago explains.
A black box for firms and governments to access Huawei's source code and collaborate on cybersecurity. That's how the Chinese telecoms giant has built its new Brussels lab, as it fights the mounting impression its proximity to Beijing could pose national security threats.
In the last 30 years, we have never received any order from Chinese government to taking data back to China. Even in future, potentially, if we received this kind of things, he said very clearly his personal statement as a founder and the CEO of this company, he will refuse. If he cannot, he will close the company.
The United States points to China's 2017 cybersecurity law that requires Chinese firms to cooperate with its intelligence agencies and has made concerted global efforts to push its allies to keep Huawei tech out of their infrastructure. However, Europe's the firm's largest market outside China, and the continent has been reticent to follow Washington's lead, relying on EU-level legislation and cybersecurity measures to protect it.
We cannot bar a company from outside Europe from the European market. Europe is open, but it's not up for grabs. There are standards. There are criteria which must be respected, and we'll follow them with the closest vigilance.
Western companies have been working to catch up, but Huawei is currently the world leader in 5G network technology, and that leaves strategic concerns in play, with decisions still to be made at the political level on the continued use of Huawei equipment.
Forbes has released its annual ranking of the richest people in the world. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos tops the list with a personal fortune of $131 billion. He's followed by Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and LVMH boss Bernard Arnault. Now, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg fell from 5th place last year to 8th place as shares of his social media giant lost value. A global market slump meant that Forbes counted fewer billionaires than it did a year ago. Their overall wealth slipped from $9.1 to $8.7 trillion. Also notable in this list, Julia, the youngest of the Kardashian clan, Kylie Jenner, has become the youngest self-made billionaire at just 21 years old.
Oh, good for her. Thank you for that, Kate Moody there. Oh, that's it from us, but do stay with us. More news coming up shortly.